This incredible story takes place in the remote forests of Canada, where John, an experienced park ranger, patrols a remote area. Suddenly, he hears an unusual noise that spreads through the trees like a piercing echo. His senses are heightened, and he pauses to listen. The sounds he hears are like screams, both inhuman and desperate, ringing alarm bells in his head. Despite this, his inner instinct urges him to listen closer. With every step, he gets closer to the source of the sound. Finally, he comes upon a scene that exceeds all his expectations. A bear lying in a clearing with its front right paw trapped in a bear trap, its head in a noose and hind legs tangled in barbed wire, making painful moans with every movement. Instinctively, John reaches for his rifle, knowing that encountering a bear is no joke, especially when the animal is injured. However, this encounter is different. John felt that the bear was in need of help. He put aside his initial fear and approached the bear cautiously. The man needed to get closer to the trap in order to inspect it, but as he did, the bear growled in a threatening manner. It was an attempt to protect itself from what it perceived as a threat. John did something surprising. He dropped his hunting equipment, the only protection he had, and laid it down on the ground, showing that he meant no harm. This act of disarming himself seemed to calm the bear down, perhaps because the animal had seen enough hunters in its life to understand that they were only dangerous when they held objects in their hands, and John's hands were now empty. While this was a brave and compassionate act, it put John in serious danger, as any sane person would have refused to get so close to a large and potentially dangerous animal, unpredictable predator. The ranger knelt down next to the bear and tried to gain its trust. He then moved closer and cut the noose from around the bear's neck. To his surprise, the bear remained calm and showed no signs of aggression towards the man. John moved on to inspect the barbed wire, which had begun to dig into the bear's body. As he carefully removed the wire, the animal's cries grew louder. Finally, the bear was free, with only one paw trapped in the wire. If John hadn't solved the problem, the bear could have attacked him. However, he had no other choice but to trust the animal. Gathering his courage, he released the bear from the trap, leaving it free. Instead of attacking, the bear stayed where it was. John felt a sense of sadness as he stepped back. When he saw the entire picture, the animal's fur was covered in deep wounds. After a few minutes, the bear gathered all its strength and stood up, but then it ran a few meters and collapsed again. John knelt down next to the bear and spoke soothing words. He didn't want the animal to suffer anymore. He knew that the poachers would eventually find it and harm it further. It was terrible. Without hesitation, John picked up his phone and called the local wildlife clinic for urgent assistance. When the team arrived, they immediately administered tranquilizers to the bear to calm it down. They carefully examined it and determined that it had likely been trapped for days, suffering from hunger and pain. They also found that an infection had set in, and surgery was necessary to prevent any further complications. If left untreated, there was a high chance that the bear might lose a leg. Together, they worked to provide the best care possible for the injured animal. They carefully loaded the bear into a vehicle and drove to the clinic in 30 minutes. Veterinarians and wildlife experts worked together to provide the bear with much-needed treatment. The wounds were cleaned, and antibiotics were administered. The gaping wounds were carefully stitched up. After the doctors completed their work, to John's horror, they revealed the disturbing truth. The bear was not the only one who had suffered. In recent weeks, there had been several other reports of wild animals with similar injuries, and other animals had suffered the same fate as the bear, a fate that infuriated John, and he was determined to do something about it. The bear remained heavily sedated and under close supervision at the clinic as he gradually recovered his strength. The hospital staff were discussing the possibility of releasing the bear back to the wildlife. But John refused the idea. It was pointless to release the bear when there were people around who might harm it. The poor animal would probably fall into a trap again, and this time it might not be lucky enough to be found in time. The staff agreed, but they had no choice. They didn't have the space or resources to keep the bear for more than a few days. Without hesitation, John started a race against time to find the culprit before the bear was released. With the evidence gathered from the clinic, he contacted the police. Together with animal control, an investigation into the case was launched. But that wasn't enough for John. He knew he had to take matters into his own hands. He installed surveillance cameras in popular hunting spots, but it was to no avail. However, in one John's fateful night was awakened by the alarm from the wildlife surveillance camera. Adrenaline rushed through his body as he jumped up and headed into the woods with a flashlight. His hands were shaking as he followed the tracks, every movement in the darkness making his heart race. The footsteps led him deeper into the forest, to a secluded area that he rarely visited. Suddenly, the sounds stopped, and an eerie silence settled over the trees. Holding his breath, he stepped into a clearing where a trap had been set. Before he could react, a branch snapped behind him, and he turned to see a dark figure privilegious towards him. Without hesitation, he jumped on top of the figure and struggled with it for a brief but fierce fight. It was the person who had set the trap. John immediately contacted the police, who arrested the man and collected the remaining evidence. During the interrogation, the man confessed to his crimes and revealed all the locations of the traps he had set. The authorities found and eliminated all the traps. But the story took an unexpected turn. Over the next few days, the bear recovered and was released back into the wild. John and his team took the bear deep into the forest, but when they released it, it did something unusual. Instead of running away and hiding, it stopped a few meters away from them and looked back one last time, as if it was thanking them for their help. At that moment, John and the rangers started crying. The bear then shifted his gaze forward and disappeared into the trees. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.